Good morning, and welcome back to the Daily Trucking Market Update podcast. I'm your host, Driven, and on this show, I dive into the markets to keep you truck drivers, you owner operators, up to date so you can best position your truck to make the most money. Now, I'll be using the DAT load board, and I appreciate them sponsoring this video. And in return, they've provided you with the link down in the description box for 10% off for your first 12 months, so check it out. Now, stick around. I got a dad joke to tell, and then we'll dive right in.
Rolling down the highway, sun just breaking through. Radio's playing loud, the show's for me and you. Learn how to book your loads and make that money flow. Keep the shiny side up wherever we go.
Now, all that I ask for the little chuckle, or maybe not, is to hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing if you get some value from this, or maybe just a laugh. But what do you call a fish with no eye? A fish. Anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So I like to start with just a quick update on the weather to see what's going on around the United States. Of course, keep in mind, you should be doing this. Now, I use Weather Street. This is not going to be the best for you guys to use. I recommend that you find one that you just like. But always keep up to date on the weather. That way, there's no surprises and you can always be on time. As far as what I see maybe potentially something going on over there in the Northwest. It's just now starting. Yeah, it looks like it's not really going to start today, but keep an eye out on the next couple of days if you're headed that way. Up there in the Northeast, you've definitely got some rain. Even east of New York. So pay attention if you're up there in the Northeast. And then you've got some rain, some pretty heavy rain actually, surrounding Florida down there. So if you are down there, pay attention. As far as the rest of the United States, looks pretty good. Kind of scrolling forward over the next couple of days, looks like maybe something's forming up there in the Great Lakes, but nothing too bad. And then outside of that, I don't really see too much. So not bad for weather today. Let's move on. Now, next, I like to go into the DAT, the national load counts. Now, why do I look at this first? Because this is going to give us a nice overview as far as what's going on in the states. And then in a few minutes, we'll actually dive into the different markets. Great example of why I do this, and then I dive into the markets is because California, all of California is not going to be great, right? The majority of the freight is going to be down there in the Los Angeles market. It may be a couple other markets, but for the most part, it's going to be down there. So we don't just want to do this. We want to actually go in and see where the freight's at. But occasionally, you're going to see some states on here that might show to be good as far as their truck to load ratio. But when we actually go into the markets, they're not really going to show all that great, or they're going to show the freight being in one spot versus the other. So it's actually important to look at both of these. And that's why I like to start right here. So Alabama, 644 loads in to 438 loads out. That's not very good, right? Not for Alabama. Arkansas, 346 loads in to 540 loads out. So that's decent, right? The loads out ratio, that's a little bit high on the demand there. So negotiating favor might be a little bit your way, truck drivers. Arizona, 571 loads in to 370 loads out. It's Arizona, right? California, 1,820 loads in to 2,490 loads out. Now, that's a little bit up, but on both sides, really. So you may not have a ton of negotiating power over there in California, but expect the rates to actually be decent as far as their average posting on the board, right? And also, one more thing that I should point out, this is going to be for dry vans. I don't cover flatbed or reefer, but this is going to be the overall market for a box. Colorado, 481 loads in to 261 loads out. It's actually a little up on the loads in, and then about par for loads out there. Connecticut, 294 loads in to 145 loads out. DC's got a little bit of freight. They've got 8 loads heading out of there. Delaware, 72 loads in to 59 loads out. Pretty standard. Florida, 2,883 loads in to 743 loads out. That's just, well, it speaks for itself, right? Just avoid it. Georgia, 2,197 loads in to 1,198 loads out. That whole market over there, I would just flat avoid it at all costs if possible. If you can't avoid it, just grab what you can, get the heck out of there. It's not going to be a ton of negotiation. Always ask, but there's really not going to be a lot of bumping going on over there. Iowa, 470 loads in to 564 loads out. So Iowa still remains above that 50-50 mark, as it has been over the past few months. And then on some days, loads into loads out ratio is way better than that. And then the truck drivers have a lot of negotiating power. Not a ton today, but still, always try. They are probably used to actually bumping the rates over there in Iowa. So try to negotiate as hard as you can. If you have issue with that, check out this video right up here. I go over a lot of negotiating tactics. You might have missed that one, but I've outside of my 10-year trucking career, all the rest of my time was spent in sales, but more specifically negotiation. So I'll give a lot of good tips and tricks and techniques in that video. So check that one out. Idaho, 109 loads in to 181 loads out. That's actually a little bit down, but I mean, it is Idaho. We're probably going to see that Northwest still remain very strong, though, given Idaho's freight. Illinois, 1,525 loads in to 2,459 loads out. That's really good shape for Illinois. It is Illinois, so, not a ton of negotiating power over there, but rates should be solid. Indiana, 865 loads in to 1,670 loads out. So very good shape for Indiana. Hopefully that Midwest is going to look real solid this week, and everybody can make some good money. Kansas, 364 loads in to 332 loads out. So we're seeing a dip in Kansas this week. Maybe it'll come on a little bit stronger later on in the week, but to start the week, it's a little bit weak. Kentucky, 607 loads in to 743 loads out. So we're seeing a bump in volume. That's really good for Kentucky. It's remaining above that 50-50 mark. So look for that one to remain strong throughout the week, as long as the trends kind of stay the same. Remains to be seen. We don't have enough data on Kentucky because they've been kind of weak a couple weeks ago to a couple months ago. Louisiana, 397 loads in to 486 loads out. Don't let that fool you, because you've got you've got that massive deficit over here in Texas, and that all of those truck drivers are going to bleed over that way and eat up all of those loads. So despite it being a good market, it's not, because there's such a poor market right next to it. Maryland, 539 loads in to 302 loads out. That's actually, I'm sorry, Massachusetts, excuse me. That is a little bit, you've got a lot of trucks headed in, and then it's about average for loads out. You've got Maryland, 533 loads in to 410 loads out. So we're seeing a dip in Maryland this week, unfortunately. Maine, 135 loads in to 133 loads out. It's amazing how almost weekly they have the exact loads out to loads in. What are they doing up there in Maine? But that's actually a dip. I think last week they averaged about 50% more loads than they had trucks up there. So a dip for Maine. Michigan, 754 loads in to 916 loads out. Love to see it. Those Great Lakes states have been very good for freight the last couple of months. And as the week progresses, that ratio gets even better and better and better. So those loads are going to be posted more, and truck drivers or owner operators, you're going to have the negotiating power up there in the Great Lakes states. Don't let the brokers fool you. Don't let them fool you. They will negotiate. I promise. I promise. Minnesota, 623 loads in to 565 loads out. So not great shape on a Monday. Typically, those Great Lakes states really aren't the best to start off with, to start your week off with, but they wind up getting stronger and stronger as the week goes on. Kind of seeing just the standard stuff out of Minnesota. We'll see how the week goes. Missouri, 587 loads in to 791 loads out. So really good for Missouri. We are definitely going to have a look at that state and see where the freight's at. Most likely it's in St. Louis, but we'll double check that just to make sure. Mississippi, 311 loads in to 469 loads out. Also one of those states, don't let them fool you, because the ones that surround them are not great markets. Unless we see every state down there in great shape, just kind of stay away from the South. It looks like it might be a kind of a rough winter. It looks like you might want to brush up or make sure that your chains are all good and you got your tools ready to go. Hope not, but by the way, stay safe if that's the case. Montana, 81 loads in to 49 loads out. North Carolina, 1,731 loads in to 1,017 loads out. Yeah, that's just North Carolina, that's pretty par for the course, unfortunately. Way down at 50-50 mark. And then you've got truck drivers obviously bouncing all over the place. Usually South Carolina's in a little bit better shape, but then you've got Atlanta right on the other side or Georgia right on the other side. So just not a good, the dirty South, just not great positioning, unfortunately. North Dakota, 56 loads into 88 loads out. Oh man, sadly, that's been one of the but kind of one of the honey holes, right? That North Dakota area, they've had almost 300% to 300 to 400% more loads to trucks the last few months. So hopefully that's not drying up. We'll see. I mean, it is still above that 50-50 mark, but I was hoping for a better start to the week out of North Dakota. Nebraska, 187 loads in to 152 loads out. That's down on production, unfortunately, for Nebraska. New Hampshire, 135 loads in to 32 loads out. Not sure what's going on up there, but that's bad even for New Hampshire. New Jersey, 836 loads in to 1,145 loads out. Just par, kind of a standard across the board for Jersey. New Mexico, 155 loads in to 411 loads out. Now, they did this to me last week. They had a massive spike earlier in the week, and then literally the next day, like these trucks just popped up out of nowhere. All of a sudden, all these loads out just fell off the board. So I'm not sure what's going on over there. Do not be fooled by that. I don't know if we got some trickery going on out of the brokers over there, but we are going to keep an eye on that because I don't like what I'm seeing. There are certainly a lot of people that are not listening to this podcast headed that way, seeing these numbers, and then I'm sure wind up sitting. So don't be fooled by that. New Mexico, not a good state for vans. Nevada, 200 loads in to 331 loads out. That's down on production. It's okay shape, but not great. Not great. New York, 790 loads in to 1,216 loads out. That's pretty normal, right over there. Just kind of normal numbers. Yeah. Ohio, 1,339 loads in to 1,983 loads out. Not the greatest that we've seen out of Ohio, but still really good shape. The loads should be posted for solid over there. Possibly get another couple $100 out on a 2-day run over there in Ohio. So always ask for it and always know your numbers. Be an educated truck driver, and they'll give you educated pricing. Oklahoma, 471 loads in to 273 loads out. That's actually up in production for Oklahoma, surprisingly. Oregon, 192 loads in to 368 loads out. Still in good shape, but that is a bit of a dip in production as far as loads out. Now, throughout the week, that Northwest does pick up a little bit. So we'll see. Or I shouldn't say necessarily picks up production, but kind of keeps up this steady pace. And if it does that, Northwest is going to remain pretty much the best area to run your truck. Pennsylvania, 1,727 loads in to 2,206 loads out. So that's normal for Pennsylvania. Should be good rates, not great rates, but not a ton of negotiating power, unfortunately, over there in PA. Rhode Island, 115 loads in to 44 loads out. South Carolina, 804 loads in to 807 loads out. And that's the best state over there. And that's not great, unfortunately. They're usually more loads out, about the same loads in, but not great over there. South Dakota, 68 loads in to 78 loads out. So okay shape. You're not going to get a lot of people bouncing out of South Dakota up to North Dakota to steal some of that freight, but still not great. Tennessee, 1,081 loads in to 1,070 loads out. We're seeing another dip there, unfortunately. Texas, 3,806 loads in. We actually have a boost in production today, 2,632 loads out. So we got some freight moving, but I mean, when you have almost 4,000 truck drivers headed that way, what are you going to do? You're not going to get paid. That's an area where if you unfortunately headed this way, hopefully you're just headed home because you're just not getting paid to run out of Texas right now. Utah, 301 loads in to 278 loads out. That's actually not terrible for Utah, but it is below that 50-50 mark. Virginia, 1,020 loads in to 760 loads out. So that's a big swing for Virginia in the negative direction. Sorry, I got a bunch of bad news today. Vermont, 42 loads in to 46 loads out. was Washington 315 loads in to 480 loads out. So once again, a bit of a dip, right? We're still well above that 50-50 mark. So anything can happen throughout the week. It's still in good shape. It's just not quite as good as it was, or as it has been in the past few weeks. So we'll see. Wisconsin, 745 loads in to 1,315 loads out. That is excellent. The Great Lakes states in very good shape. And if production increases throughout the week, which it normally does, it's going to be even better. So West Virginia, 156 loads in to 164 loads out. And then we've got Wyoming at 60 loads in to 51 loads out. Now we're going to dive right into these trend lines. Today is Monday, so this is the best day to keep up with those. Overall, spot load posts are up 12.5%. So last week they were up 12.5% to the week before. So that's good. Compared to last September, loads are down 13%. Look for that to get better the closer and closer we get to November, hopefully. The load to truck ratio last week compared to the week before is up almost 22% to 21.6. That's solid. That's what we want to see. And then September to September last year, down almost 10%. That's actually way better than what the numbers were showing throughout the summer. So we're moving in the right direction. Just hang in there. It's not something that's going to happen overnight and all of a sudden the market's going to be great. So hang in there. They are getting better. These numbers are getting better almost every single week. The van spot rates, from last week to the week before, they're up 1%. And then they're the same as they were in September for this year and last year. So that is actually that's a pretty healthy move, about 3 to 4% on both of them. So very, very good. Not going to go into the flatbed. Sorry, guys. I hope you didn't get excited if you're pulling a skateboard. For the national spot rates, on average, we are in October, we're up 4 pennies from last month to $2.01 for the vans. For the skateboards, the flatbeds, the decks, we're up 4 pennies to $2.43 on average. And for the reefers, we're down 2 pennies to $2.35. But you guys know what's coming, so it's okay. Looking at the weekly brief, let's see here. That's an old one, so we're not going to cover that today. And then the fuel prices they've remained the same. How do they remain the same every week? I don't know, but they remain the same at $3.54 across the board. That's no change from the week prior. Now let's dive into the actual markets, the specific markets, and let's look to see where this freight is actually located. Well, let's start up here in the Northwest. It's not located in Seattle, which is interesting. The majority of the freight is going to be in the Portland area, and even Oregon is showing to be solid. But by the time you get there, if you're not there already, it's not going to be in the lower half of the Oregon area. It's going to be in that Portland area. So if you're headed up to the Northwest, make sure that you're looking for your next load running out of Portland. Looking over at California. Well, California turned me into a liar today because normally the entirety of the bottom half of this Los Angeles market is red. And today it's only the very, very small Los Angeles market. So that's interesting. And then you've got the rest of California. You've got the San Francisco market showing to be hot. And then the very northern part of it, but don't be fooled by that because that's, there's not a ton of freight up there. It's just hot for its actual market. So interesting stuff out of California. Maybe the West is cooling off a little bit. The Northwest, we're going to keep a close eye on those numbers because the Northwest has been very solid. Let's move over to the Central South. Just skip over Arizona and New Mexico at all costs. You don't want to take a van there. You can easily get stuck, and the rates are very low compared to the rest of the United States. But in Texas, it looks like we've got out of the Houston, Dallas market, Houston is the best market. And if you remember, it's almost 2,000 load deficit for truck drivers. So you're not going to make a ton of money running down here. Unfortunately, get out. Looks like there's some freight up there in the Panhandle, but not a lot of freight. Once again, just up for its actual market. In Louisiana, the freight is on the bottom half. So if you are going to run this way, hopefully you're going to come to Houston. And then if you have to, you might have to bounce all the way over to Louisiana to get something that pays decent. Up there in Arkansas, so the majority of Arkansas is shown to be red, but we know because we're educated, right, that the majority of that freight is actually going to be closer to Little Rock and Memphis. So that's where that freight's going to be at for that area. And then nothing to speak of over in the dirty South, Southeast, as I like to call it. But my wife will get a chuckle out of that. But yeah, not much to speak of. Anyway, moving on into the Midwest, you've got. I mean, it looks like a freaking puzzle piece. Just all different kinds of colors going on everywhere. Missouri, yes, we are seeing the majority of the freight in the St. Louis market, but it's also showing some of it to be in the Kansas City market. So the Kansas City markets and the St. Louis markets, they haven't been the greatest where you have a ton of negotiating power, but they are in good shape. So that's where your freight's going to be there. In the Illinois market, it's almost all of it's going to be in the northern half, and it's showing the Chicago area. So we'd like to see that red. We would like to see that start red and remain red throughout the entirety of the week, but that hasn't been the case. So not great. Iowa, we actually have a hot market, which is fascinating because this hasn't been the case for Iowa either. But the very southeastern part of Iowa is shown to have the most freight in Iowa. So interesting there. Minnesota. Well, actually, let's continue. Let's finish up the Midwest real quick. Indiana, excuse me. The markets that are closest to Chicago and Indiana are shown to be a little hot. But as the week progresses, the majority of the freight in Indiana is going to be in that southern half. And then looking down into Kentucky, it looks like the freight that's going on there is going to be over in the Louisville area and possibly in the northern half. But I would gravitate towards Louisville, possibly even Cincinnati, because Cincinnati you could bounce over to Louisville. It's not a long deadhead. The Great Lakes states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. So Minnesota, the majority of the freight's in the southeast. That's pretty normal. It's in Minneapolis over there. Wisconsin, usually you got the freight you got that market that's really close to Minneapolis. It's usually okay. And then the eastern half of Wisconsin is generally where the freight's at up there. But it shows to be Wisconsin cooling off a little bit. But like I said, we'll need to see this later in the week. Those are Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan are great states to wind up in later in the week and get a longer haul for your money and your time. Michigan, it's been the the western half of Michigan, so not the Detroit market if you're directionally challenged. Hopefully not, you're a truck driver, but the western half, so which would be the opposite side of Detroit. Looking down, we got Ohio. So the Ohio freight is showing to be on the eastern half as well as the northern half, but the northeastern side is going to be better than the northwestern side. And that market over there usually remains hot all week. So if you're in Ohio and look to the northeast, Pennsylvania, pretty much all of it is hot. But as we move throughout the week, it's the majority of the freight is going to be on the eastern half. But Pittsburgh usually has some freight starting out on Monday. So sock that one away for some knowledge for the future. And then Jersey, the entirety of Jersey is showing red, but later in the week, it'll be the northern half. New York, actually, the northern half of New York is showing to be hot, but that's just right now. It will likely not. I don't have a crystal ball. It will likely not be that way later in the week. So, and then, yeah, we're not going to even touch that blue southeastern area just because there's really not a lot of reason to. Anyway, I sincerely appreciate you guys tuning in. I do this every single day that I'm available, of course. But look for it to be out roughly, I'm shooting for 8 to 9 a.m. On a daily basis. And in the future, it's going to be in podcast format, so that way you're not having to roll down the road with a YouTube video rolling on. I do this out of convenience for you guys, so that way you can keep your pulse, your finger on the pulse of the trucking market so that way you know where to position your truck to make the most money. That's the most important thing for owner operators to make the most money, is to position your truck the right way. When you're in an overall bad market, you have to position yourself the right way to get the loads that are posted the best on the load board, because it's kind of a dogfight for those. There's generally not a ton of negotiating techniques going on. Why do I keep talking about negotiation? Because when the markets turn good, you're already prepared. You've been negotiating with these brokers. Even if you're failing, keep at it, because when the market turns good, turns to the truck driver's favor, you're going to be skilled enough. That way you're going to add $10,000 to $30,000 of bottom line, just straight up bottom line to your business. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And even still, in bad markets, these brokers will bump. If they're not bumping for you, then you're doing something a little bit wrong. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but it's true. They will negotiate even in poor markets. I've been there. I've done it. You have to arm yourself with the right negotiating skills, but more importantly, you got to position your truck the right way. So that's why I do this. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, consider subscribing, and keep that shiny side up. Stay safe. As always, stay driven. I'll see you tomorrow.